as a clinician, I've known a number of people I've treated over the year that would not meet the technical criteria for diagnosis because they did directly witness something or have it happen to them that involves a threat to life, danger or death or something like that. With PTSD, it's always in the eye of the beholder, and clearly there are people who are exquisitely sensitive to abandonment, for instance, or to betrayal, or to humiliation, and they have interpersonal kinds of experiences where this happens, and it hits them in a way such that they develop PTSD symptoms. Now, a part of the problem with the PTSD diagnosis initially, it's the only diagnosis in DSM where you have to have a particular kind of event as a part of the diagnosis, and then the symptoms. The rest of DSM are syndromal diagnoses: depression, anxiety, you name it. It's a list of symptoms. It never specifies that it has to be a particular precipitating event, with the one exception of PTSD. And the assumption was made that occurs only if you have directly witnessed or something very dangerous, life-threatening, and so forth. And yet many people have these other experiences of abandonment and betrayal and extraordinary humiliation and those kind of issues, and they develop the symptoms. There was a study that was done about 10 years ago. It looked at a number of people, over 800 people, who had symptoms of PTSD, and about 40% of those people did not have what we would normally think of as traumatic events, okay, in the classic PTSD sense of the word. These are people that got fired from a job. These are people that had a divorce or marital separation. But they developed classic symptoms: nightmares, intrusive experiences, panic attacks, periods of profound dissociation and numbing. Symptomatically, they had PTSD, but they didn't meet the criteria. So those are major problems I have with the way it's been looked at in the past. For me, I keep coming back to this, but I think the sort of bottom line issue is, what does a diagnosis of PTSD do, or what should it do? And that is, it should lead to specific guidelines about treatment. There are people that have PTSD, and if they go to talk to a psychotherapist and get sort of generic talk therapy, one thing that happens is that the dropout rates after the first session are extraordinarily high. And that is because the nature of PTSD is that they are exquisitely sensitive. They start talking about remembering or reflecting on the event, and their emotions skyrocket. And what will happen then is they'll feel out of control. So even a therapist who's a compassionate, empathic, decent human being and good therapist might say, "Can you tell me more about that?" And that could then open the floodgate, and these people drop out of treatment. So regardless of whether they witnessed, the death of somebody, for instance, or they were raped, for instance, and their life was threatened, or they got a profoundly humiliating demotion at work, or were fired, or what have you. The issue is, if they have PTSD symptoms, they are high risk, very high risk, that if somebody approaches talking to them about this, that if they don't follow the protocol really for treating PTSD, okay, then what's going to happen is they're going to open this floodgate of emotions, and these people are not going to be showing up to their second appointment. They're going to be hurt by the treatment. And so I think that's where, if you broaden the criteria for the events that can cause this, that it translates into probably much better care for people to ultimately get the diagnosis. And if people come in and say, "Oh, I have PTSD because I went through a divorce," but they don't have the symptoms, I mean, the clinician is going to carefully look for whatever their presenting symptoms are. If they don't have, people can be malingerers. They can make stuff up, for financial gain or something. But if the person doesn't have severe intrusive experiences, they don't have nightmares, they don't have dissociative episodes, then they don't have PTSD. They had a bad experience, has been understandably very upsetting, but they don't meet the criteria for PTSD. But the new criteria say you have expanded kind of life events that can trigger this, but you also have to have the clinical syndrome of those symptoms that I just mentioned.